rate in the 7 months to July, and the turnaround is nowhere in sight. I guess we'll have to wait till the spring is over to see if something happens. But the recent instability we have in our economy has caused a drop in buyer confidence, obviously. People look to save their money rather than outlaying it on a property. Now, obviously, bad news all round. Well, for the vendors, unsold winter stock and new properties starting to appear, vendors could be forced to drop their prices to get a sale. In the studio to discuss that and other things, the state of the property market, Wilson Luna from Your Family, Your Money, real money advice for families. G'day, mate.
G'day, champion.
Good to see you again. I haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we're sitting on our hands, and is that the reason we're still a bit worried about life?
Yeah, look, I think the climate generally has forced a lot of people to sort of stay on the sidelines, and unfortunately, this is traditionally when our property market sells about 40% of its stock for the year.
In the springtime.
The springtime. So it doesn't help a lot. And not only that, the amount of time on market most properties are having is increasing dramatically.
Yeah.
And add on to that the fact that some vendors are actually beginning to say, look, let's drop it because, we want to be first to mark and sort of get rid of our properties before the others
Well,
do.
the new ones arrive.
Yeah, so it's a really complicated scenario, this one.
Yeah, and the big four banks have been dropping their fixed rates for mortgages below the standard variable, making the security of a fixed loan even more appealing, I suppose, to a worried borrower. Are you a fan of that?
Look, historically, if you look at what it costs to the cost of a loan from a variable perspective over the entire term of the loan, it actually works out cheaper from a variable perspective.
Okay.
As compared to a fixed. But
yes,
if you're one of those borrowers that can't sleep at night because you're worried, look, just say the interest rates do go up or the RBA does push them up, I would suggest now's not a bad time to go out there, fix them, and get yourself a good night's sleep. At least you'll know what you're paying consistently over time.
Yeah, that's the thing. Oh, by the way, Wilson's here, so if you want to have a chat to him, by all means, give him a call, 13 13 32. Okay, what are some of these substantial breakout costs that people should consider before signing up to a mortgage with the fixed interest rate?
Yeah, breakout costs are the main consideration whenever you're getting fixed, because what generally happens is you want to break out of it usually when variable interest rates are cheaper than the fixed ones. You wouldn't want to do it any other time.
Talk about a juggling.
So the way they generally calculate it, and this depending on bank obviously, but what they do is they calculate the difference between the variable and the fixed, then they multiply it over the period of time which you've got left on that loan,
right,
and then they multiply it by the loan amount that you've got.
Yeah.
So it can be pretty substantial depending on what bank and what conditions they have.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, these people called Fitch, the Fitch ratings people, for the second quarter of 2011, it said that the struggle to maintain a mortgage is a battle that many families are just simply losing. Why is that? They just overextended themselves? What have they done?
There's so many considerations. They're saying that 1 in 50 families are pretty much falling behind on their mortgage, right, which is one of the highest figures for historically pretty much. And I think one of the biggest problems as well is that a lot of banks, and recently some of our findings that we've found were that banks are again lending at 95%. Of the total amount. So they're obviously lending, they're lending it to the wrong people. These are 2.5-year high, so they're back to their old habits. And unfortunately, whenever you do this, you're going to get people overextending themselves. The RBA says that the safe rate is about 30% of your income. And there's a lot of loans out there that are at about 60% of a family's income. So you can imagine that they're going way overboard. Oh,
sure. By the way, are you a fan of the first homeowners grant only being applied to new dwellings, taking it away from the older ones?
Look, I'm not. I believe any kind of subsidy, particularly at that level, all it really does in the long run is increase the price of the properties anyway.
Okay.
And I'm also a fan that it's traditional that the main part about walking into your home, if you remember, years and years ago, was that you had to save up your own deposit and you had to save up. And just that habit of having to do that generally gave you the accountability to know that you could continue paying the loan off. The problem when you start giving money away or when you start giving out grants is you're really conditioning people for the wrong, and the people that are getting into the mortgages are the wrong ones because they're the ones that are least able to pay for them.
The homeowners grant and the interest rates dropping, do you think that sort of tempts people to jump in the lake and really overextend themselves? Because once you've jumped in, it's pretty hard to jump back out again.
Unfortunately, the people that are jumping in are the wrong ones.
Yeah.
That's my only condition with that, because it's people that have been dying to get inside the property market and couldn't afford it, so they wait for that little bit of an advantage to jump in there, not knowing that down the track things could change, someone could lose their employment, conditions could change, and all of a sudden they're tight and they're in big trouble, tears.
Is it a bit patchy? I know the high end of the property market has just collapsed almost completely. Anything over $2 million they just can't sell. What areas of Sydney are worst affected? Are you aware of that?
Look, I think primarily the high end, like you just mentioned, they're the ones that are getting really, really hit. And the other one is pretty much the western suburbs, the outer west is really getting hit as well. Your Fairfields, Liverpools, them kind of areas. They're getting hit, probably because in a lot of cases they were dual income families that were working and one of them lost their jobs
Yeah, right.
So that's sort of, there's a big glut down there as well.
Yeah. Look, and you hear constantly that over time we're going to be inner city dwellers. You'll live near a train station because you've got to be close to work, so it'll be medium and high density housing. That's probably a few years hence. But I wonder if we're ever going to see the day when, a young family doesn't want to own their own home with a little backyard.
Yeah, it's the Australian tradition. What is it?
Yeah.
The American wants to make multi-billion dollars, but the Australian just wants his own backyard.
That's it.
So it's kind of our culture and it's our value system. So indirectly, it's one of the reasons why we pay so much for our homes. I think we're paying at the moment 6.5 times our income compared to the average of about 3.5 times globally.
Yeah.
So we're way overextended already.
Yeah.
It's all a matter of, look, if you can afford it, please, go ahead, do it. But if you
do
find
it,
yourself you're stretching, consider renting for a while and saving up that deposit and saving up a good enough deposit. When you get in there, you're not basically working for your mortgage like many people are, unfortunately.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of listeners will say to me, yeah, that's okay to say, but gee, rents are expensive too, and they seem to be going up as well. So it's a bit of a spiral, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. But
Yeah.
look, from a rental versus mortgage perspective, it's by the way, it's one of the highest cost over the last ABS report that came out pretty much said that 5 years ago compared to now, it's gone up close to $80 to $100 a week for a family. Yeah, per week. So it's a big cost. Traditionally, though, and even now, rents are proportionally much lower as compared to the quality of property that you can get for the same amount of mortgage, if that makes sense. So it's still slightly cheaper, but I agree, rents are still very high nonetheless.
Yeah. Look, people, Wilson, are obviously worried, and I suppose they're worried about even a property crash, but the country's going okay. I mean, unemployment's still all right, and we still seem to be quarantined to an extent to what the dreadful things that are happening in Europe. And I mean, they're fair income. The more I read about that, they are in more trouble than Speed Gordon was ever in. They're even talking about, the value of the euro. I mean, we're lucky we live here.
Yeah.
I mean, could we ever foresee some sort of crash in property?
Look, I think we've got unique dynamics here in Australia. So as much as our property prices will go down, there's a lot of factors that won't allow them to go down to the degree that, let's say, in the States and in London they've gone down. Yeah. But nonetheless, we've got to look at three main areas. And the main areas are unemployment. Let's keep our eye on that.
Yes,
as long as that doesn't spike, we're okay.
Yeah.
Number two, we really need to look at the amount of properties on the market because obviously it's a demand supply and the clearance rate, which is happening over there. And number three, and probably the most important, we do, whether we like it or not, have to look overseas because unfortunately countries like the States do consume about 60% of everything that gets produced, and countries like China, the country that we're basically relying on for our survival at the moment, does produce a lot of those goods for America. So if America doesn't get out of it through this next stimulus package, we've got to look at that because it will affect us down the track, unfortunately. And
the stock market, I mean, the Americans, Dow Jones went up almost, 2-3 days in a row, which was a bit encouraging, or not? You expecting it just to take another bath again next week?
I think anything that happens from now to the next 2 months is the market's basically trying to find themselves. Yeah. I mean, there's a bit of optimism at the moment that maybe that new stimulus that they're proposing might have some effect, but until sort of the tyres hit the ground, we're sort of guessworking at the moment, and I think it's a matter of a lot of that stuff needs to get resolved in Europe and in the States, and once it does, then we can sort of start looking for that open tunnel at the end of it anyway.
Yeah, and just broadly, I mean, my dear old grandma used to say, if you can't afford it, don't buy it, and that was the thinking back then. I mean, you saved the money, and then you bought whatever it was. Nowadays, I mean, we've got the Gen Ys and the Gen Xs who actually want to have the damn thing now. So
I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Exactly. It's a matter of, let's go back to how it was in terms of, I mean, obviously use some credit for property. It's not a bad thing,
of course,
but keep things within a moderation. If you can't foresee yourself, if you foresee yourself extending yourself, well, watch out, pull it back and get into something that you can actually afford. It's not about competing with the Joneses or getting things together, getting things today. It's more about, being comfortable and, not every single day struggling. Yeah,
look, I worry too that in this segment, in fact, right throughout society, radio, television, newspapers, it is all a bit doom and gloom at the moment. Is there anything positive on the horizon that my listeners can hang on to?
Yeah, look, I think it's important, although there's a lot of reports out there, I think when we look at ourselves, and I said this only last week, I was actually doing an interview exactly on this topic, and it's, have a look at the facts and listen carefully to the variables you need to look out for. But when you look at Australia from a global perspective, we really are the lucky
country. Going pretty well. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of factors that are on our side as well. Yeah. It's just a matter of, keep it in the back of your mind and look for some figures. And as long as everything keeps running the way it should, I think we'll walk out of this okay. Yeah. I mean, we're going to go through some turbulence, but I think overall we're differently positioned than most of the other nations. We haven't borrowed to that extent, and we've got a totally different dynamics in our economy.
You even get people who say, oh, what happens when the mining boom finishes. Well, I think the Chinese are going to be buying it for another 20 or 30 years at least, so we should be, at least confident about that.
Yeah, I think the mining's okay for a while to come, to be honest. Yeah.
All right, mate, that's Wilson Luna. He's a friend of ours from Your Family, Your Money, real money advice for families and good advice too. See you again, mate.
Thanks, champ.
Wilson Luna. It's 4:25.